Probably the key to understanding Iago is in the answer to the huge question, why? We see Iago busily setting about committing all these heinous acts, and we are compelled to ask ourselves, why? Even Othello exclaims of Iago in Act 5, "Will you, I pray, demand that demi-devil, why he hath thus ensnared my soul and body?" Iago refuses to answer him. Even he cannot provide a simple answer to this conundrum. If Iago were a less complicated character, it would all be much easier. But much like the ogre Shrek, it turns out Iago has layers. If we bend our minds to his outer and more superficial layer, the whys are all there right in the soliloquies. He hates Othello. He also hates Cassio. He provides reasons. Othello gave a position that Iago prized to Cassio. He suspects that Othello has slept with Emilia. He says that Cassio might have done the same. He takes care to explain these reasons to the audience, and yet we are not entirely convinced. Coleridge calls this aspect of his character motive hunting. The reasons he provides don't add up. They look more like rationalizations, as if he is explaining his actions to himself. Think about it. He doesn't act like a man who has been cuckolded. There isn't the passionate emotion behind his actions that we would expect from a keenly jealous man. He doesn't seem to be desperately in love with his wife either. He even says that he has no proof that she was unfaithful, and the way he shares this information with us makes us think that his objection is more to some theoretical infidelity than any actual real one. He seems to despise women anyway, as we see in the scene between him and Desdemona, when he, albeit teasingly, presents a view of women that is decidedly unflattering. He appears to regard women largely as silly and useful, but not entirely necessary objects of pleasure. So it can't be personal. Then maybe his issue is more professional. So can we attribute his actions to professional jealousy? Perhaps. But on closer examination, Othello has not acted unkindly here. Iago's application was too late, and Othello has been generous enough to find another position for him. There is also reason to doubt whether Iago was entirely qualified for the position as a more senior officer. Yet, is this really enough reason to wish to destroy someone? We are going to have to peel off another layer to get closer to the truth. Why then would it bother Iago that he was passed over for a promotion, or that someone might have had their way with his wife? This must be more to do with the way that he sees himself. A man with a particularly high opinion of himself might really resent the fact that someone else should be marked as his superior. This is more likely, particularly as there are so many clues in the text to show how contemptuous Iago is of both Cassio and Othello. Then it is significant too that Iago acknowledges their goodness in many ways. He describes Othello as having a constant, loving, noble nature, and Cassio as being a proper man, as well as being handsome and charming. And we know that Iago despises goodness in people In the scene where he complains to Rodrigo of not being given the position as lieutenant, he expresses admiration for the lying rascal who lines his pockets at his employer's expense, and he regards honest workers as fools. Here is the egotism that A.C. Bradley tells us is at the center of Iago's character. To quote Bradley, he writes, Iago's creed is that absolute egoism is the only rational and proper attitude, and that conscience or honor or any kind of regard for others is an absurdity. Now we are even closer to establishing what is behind Iago's actions. Othello has offended Iago's pride in himself. This would also explain why a particularly cold and unloving man would be offended by someone sleeping with his wife. The thought that they are getting the better of him touches him right on the ego. Up until now, Iago has achieved a reputation for honesty, largely because of his habit of making cynical observations about life and his coarse language, which is interpreted as plain speaking or bluntness. He comes across as a hearty, genial, bluff soldier and comrade. He is 28 years old and has fought in several campaigns, but has not been promoted to a position as an officer. He must be asking himself why all the good people out there, whom he abominates, are doing well for themselves, where he is not. And that in spite of his inner conviction that he is smarter than all of them anyway. Is it any surprise then that given the opportunity presented by the lull in activities occurring in Cyprus, Iago seizes the moment to make a move to prove to himself his superiority and power over the lesser humans in his ambit? A lazy man might have shrugged his shoulders and moved on, but Iago proves to be anything but lazy. In fact, he finds the action of the pursuit of his goals to be entirely energizing. He tells us that pleasure and action make the hours seem short. As soon as he begins to unfold the elements of his intrigue, the excitement of actively pursuing his wicked objectives possesses him. He sets a chain of events in motion which will need to be deftly managed, with a group of participants who will have to be carefully manipulated. Much is made of Iago's brilliant tactical brain, and this is certainly true up to a point. It is a creative brain that dreams up a plot as shrewdly integrated as his. Moreover, he is a clever opportunist, as he shows in the quickness of his responses when he engineers Cassio's fall from grace. It takes a cool head and an ability to innovate to send Rodrigo to raise the alarm in the heat of a volatile situation. Not to mention a masterful command of events to report to Othello on the fight scene with Cassio, while still making it seem that he is an extremely unwilling snitch. But we will find that Iago's intelligence stretches so far and no further. He underestimates the redeeming power of love. This is probably because he equates love with weakness. He tells Rodrigo it is a lust of the blood and a permission of the will. In the end, he is destroyed by the thing that he least understands. What is more, conceptually, Iago becomes the medium through which Shakespeare demonstrates the perilous balance between good and evil. That despite its terrible power, ultimately evil will fail precisely because it has no comprehension of innocence, purity, and self-sacrifice.